Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
It is good to be back.
Today, we're doing something a little different. Usually, you'll find us wading through these dense economic theories or, sociological treatises.
Right, the heavy stuff.
The heavy stuff. But today, we are turning our attention to a seminal work of speculative fiction. And I have to say, reading it, it feels less like a novel and, well, more like a visceral confrontation with history. We're doing a deep dive into Kindred by Octavia E. Butler.
And this does represent a fascinating shift for us. But, I would argue that Butler offers something unique here, something a history textbook simply cannot provide.
How so?
Well, this isn't just a story about time travel. It's a rigorous investigation into how systems of power and violence reproduce themselves across time. It asks this really fundamental systems question. How is the present bound to the past?
And the answer isn't dates or treaties?
Not at all. The answer it provides is about mechanisms of survival, of dependency, and of course coercion.
And I think that's exactly why this book fits our mission so perfectly. We often treat historical systems like slavery as closed chapters. We look at a timeline, we see the year 1865, we see the Emancipation Proclamation, and we think, okay, the system ended, case closed. We sort of file it away as distant history that stays in the past.
Exactly. And that is the very perception crisis that Butler is attacking head on. The book makes this powerful argument that the structural effects persist. They're in our modern institutions, they're in lived experiences.
So it's not just memory.
It's not just memory. We are looking at how history is physically and psychologically embedded in us. The book, it actually challenges the linearity of time itself when it comes to trauma.
Yeah.
It forces you to ask if a system ever truly ends just because the law changes on paper.
So before we get into the heavy machinery of the analysis, let's define our scope for this deep dive.
Good idea.
We are focusing on the systems of domination and survival that Butler lays out. This is not a book review. We aren't here to rate the prose or, pass moral judgment on the characters in a vacuum.
Right, and we're not here to critique speculative fiction tropes either.
No, our mission is a systems-level analysis. We want to understand how power functions within the narrative she builds.
Which is really the only way to get at what Butler was doing. She wasn't writing a costume drama. She was mapping a survival engine.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to see if a modern person, with all our modern ideas, could actually survive the machinery of the past.
Let's start with the architect of this engine, then, Octavia E. Butler. To understand Kindred, you really have to understand where she was coming from.
Absolutely.
She wasn't just a sci-fi writer. She was deeply, deeply concerned with hierarchy, with power, and with human adaptability. And her personal background plays a massive role here, specifically her mother.
Right. This is so important. Butler's mother was a housemaid. And Butler grew up in a world where she watched her mother enter white households through the back door. She saw her mother treated as invisible.
Spoken about as if she wasn't even in the room.
Exactly. A profound dehumanization, a negation of presence. And Butler saw her mother swallow her pride day after day just to put food on the table. That endurance, that quiet strength, it's all over the book.
And Butler mentioned that this influenced her desire to write Kindred. But there was another spark, wasn't there? Something about the generation gap in the 60s and 70s.
Yes, this is a crucial piece of context. In the 1960s and 70s, you have the rise of the Black Power movement, and with it, a shift in rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
Butler started encountering many young people who felt a sense of, shame toward their ancestors.
Shame.
Yeah. They would ask, essentially, why didn't they rebel? Why did they let themselves be enslaved? There was this judgment from the present, this idea that the ancestors were weak or docile or even complicit because they didn't burn the plantations down every single day.
That is a very, very easy judgment to make from the safety of the present, isn't it? It's easy to be a revolutionary when you aren't the one staring down the barrel of a gun.
Precisely. And Butler wrote Kindred specifically to confront that abstract judgment. She wanted to force a modern subject, someone with modern sensibilities, a modern sense of pride, a modern understanding of freedom, to endure the reality directly.
She wanted to test the hypothesis.
She did. If you take a strong, independent modern woman and you drop her into a Maryland plantation in 1815, does she burn it all down, or does she learn very quickly just to survive?
So she creates Dana, a Black woman living in 1976 Los Angeles. She's a writer, she's independent, she's married to a white man, Kevin, and then poof, she's suddenly snatched out of her living room and dropped into the antebellum South. Now, usually this gets labeled science fiction, but Butler herself, she pushed back on that label, didn't she?
She did. She preferred to call it a grim fantasy. And that distinction really matters for our analysis.
Why does it matter?
Because in science fiction, there's usually a mechanism. There's a time machine, a wormhole, a DeLorean.
Yeah.
Some kind of technological explanation that makes the problem a puzzle you can solve.
But in Kindred, there's no machine, there's no science.
It just happens.
Right. She gets dizzy, the room blurs, and she's gone.
It functions more like an inexplicable psychohistorical force. It operates almost like a convulsive memory or a birth trauma rather than a travel itinerary. It links the protagonist, Dana, to her ancestors through blood and danger, not technology.
So the connection itself is biological, not mechanical.
Yes, it suggests that the link between the past and present isn't about physics, it's about unresolved lineage. She is pulled back because her ancestor is in mortal danger. Her existence depends on his survival.
Which leads us right to the central thesis we want to unpack today. If we strip away all the genre labels and everything, what is the core argument that Butler is making about the system of slavery?
The thesis, in plain language, is that the legacy of slavery is not metaphorical. It's not a dusty old story. It is physically, psychologically, and structurally embedded in the present.
And the book really challenges the idea of home and safety. Dana is constantly pulled between these two worlds, 1976, which is the bicentennial of American freedom.
And 1815, the height of American slavery. By the end of the novel, she is, in her own words, not quite whole.
And we have to talk about that ending, the physical toll. She loses her left arm.
Yes. The brutal, shocking moment. She returns to the present for the final time, but her arm gets crushed in the wall where she rematerializes. But if you look at it structurally, it's the proof of the thesis.
How so?
You cannot interact with such a violent system and leave intact. You don't get to be a tourist in history and go home whole. The system takes a piece of you, literally. It leaves a mark you can never erase.
Okay, let's unpack this system. We've broken this down into 5 core insights about how the machinery of slavery operates in the book. Let's start with insight number 1. Violence as a stabilizing mechanism.
This is the absolute foundation of the world. And we see it in the very first jump Dana makes. The first time she's pulled back. She arrives at a river, sees a young white boy drowning, and she saves his life.
A purely human moral act, instinct.
Exactly. A child is dying. You save the child. That's what anyone would do.
And her reward for this is a gun in her face.
The boy's father, Tom Whalen, arrives on the scene. He sees a strange black woman touching his son. He doesn't see a savior, he sees a threat. And he immediately aims his rifle at her.
It's so jarring. I mean, she just saved the kid's life. But the system's logic completely overrides the moral reality of the situation.
In this system, skin color dictates threat levels instantly. And violence, the gun, the whip, it's not just sadism. This is a key point we have to understand. We often think of slaveholders in fiction as just these evil sadists, and sure, many were.
But it's more than that.
It's the operating system. It establishes order. It is the language of the realm. Tom Whalen isn't necessarily just angry. He is asserting the hierarchy. He's reminding everyone of the rules.
There's a scene that really illustrates this operating system concept for me. The whipping of a field hand. Dana is forced to watch it. It's not just that it happens, it's how it happens that's so important.
Yes. Tom Whalen ties a man to a tree and whips him. But look at the staging. He doesn't do it in private. He forces the other enslaved people to watch. This is violence as spectacle.
A broadcast message.
It's a broadcast message to the entire community. It's not just punishment for the individual. It enforces submission in the observers. It creates a collective trauma that stabilizes the hierarchy. If you look away, you might be next. If you try to intervene, you will die.
So it neutralizes solidarity through terror. It makes you almost grateful that it isn't you on that tree, which in turn isolates the victim.
Exactly. It systematically breaks the community bonds that are necessary for any kind of organized rebellion.
Which brings us to insight number 2, what you call structural enforced dependency. The relationship between Dana and that boy she saves, Rufus, is, well, it's the core of the entire book.
It is the central nervous system of the novel. They are kindred. It's right there in the title. Dana realizes early on that Rufus Whalen is her ancestor. He has to survive long enough to father a child with a woman named Alice, or else Dana will cease to exist.
So she has this bizarre biological imperative to keep this future white slaveholder alive. She saves him from drowning, then she saves him from a fire, from a fight, from illness. She's his unwilling guardian angel.
And Rufus, as he grows up, he realizes this. This is where the system gets so insidious. He creates a feedback loop. He knows Dana must save him. So he starts to weaponize that dependency. He understands that her survival is tied directly to his, which gives him almost absolute power over her agency.
There's that chilling scene with the map. Dana finds a map of Maryland, her one real hope of navigating north to freedom, and Rufus catches her with it.
And what does he do? He doesn't just take it from her.
Yeah.
He doesn't just punish her. He threatens to burn it. He uses her need for his protection to blackmail her into staying. He says effectively, you need me to survive in this time period. If you try to leave me, I'll destroy your only hope of escape. The system turns what should be a personal relationship into pure leverage. He extracts her loyalty not through affection, but through his monopoly on her safety.
It's a hostage situation, but the hostage is also the bodyguard. It's incredibly messed up.
That's a perfect description. And this dependency, it forces Dana directly into insight number 3, moral compromise under coercion. This is where the judgment of the modern observer really starts to crumble. The book asks you, what is the price of survival?
And to understand this, we have to talk about Alice. Alice starts as a freeborn black woman. She tries to run away with her enslaved husband, Isaac. They get caught. Isaac is. Well, he's mutilated and sold south, and Alice is enslaved by Rufus.
And Rufus claims he loves Alice. But since she hates him, rightfully so, he wants to force her into his bed. But he creates this twisted scenario. He doesn't just want to physically rape her every time. He wants her to be willing. He wants the fantasy of consent. So he goes to Dana for help.
This scene, I think it makes my skin crawl more than almost any other in the book. He gives Dana a choice, he says. Either you convince Alice to sleep with me or I will beat her, possibly to death.
And this is the ultimate trap of the system. It forces Dana into the role of the pimp or the mammy just to save Alice's life. Think about the geometry of that choice for a second.
There's no good option.
None. If Dana refuses, Alice likely dies from the beating. If Alice dies, Dana's entire family line ends, and Dana effectively commits a form of suicide. But if she agrees, she becomes complicit in Alice's sexual victimization.
And she does it. She talks Alice into it. She tells her, just survive, give him what he wants so you can live to see another day.
And in that moment, the system forces the victim to become complicit in the victimization of others just to ensure their own survival. It strips Dana of her moral purity. She can no longer stand on the high ground of modern morality. She's down in the mud with everyone else, making impossible choices. It destroys that easy binary of good guy and bad guy among the victims.
It reminds me of what you said earlier about the 1960s generation asking, why didn't they rebel? This scene is the answer.
Yeah.
Because rebellion might mean your cousin, your sister, your ancestor gets beaten to death.
Exactly. And this links directly to our insight number 4,
Yeah.
this conflict between survival and what might be judged as selling out. We see this so clearly with the character of Sarah the cook.
Sarah is a character who, to a superficial observer, might look like the contented slave. She runs the house, she keeps her head down, she serves the food, she even bosses Dana around a bit. A modern militant might look at her and call her a collaborator.
And Uncle Tom, to use the slur. But when you look closer, when Dana looks closer, that judgment just completely falls apart. Sarah isn't passive. She is terrified. We learn that Tom Whalen sold all of her children except one, a girl named Carrie, who is mute. Sarah knows deep in her bones that her submission is the rent she pays to keep Carrie on that plantation with her.
So her silence isn't weakness at all. It's a calculated strategy to protect her last remaining child.
Precisely. Resistance in this system isn't always a dramatic open rebellion. It's not always running away. Sometimes resistance is the quiet, crushing, day-to-day endurance required to keep a single loved one alive. The book reframes selling out as a desperate form of protective love. If Sarah rebels, Carrie is sold south. Sarah sacrifices her own dignity to save her daughter's life. In that context, that is a form of heroism, not weakness.
And finally, this brings us to insight number 5, conditioning and what Dana calls the dulling effect. Dana is a modern woman from 1970s Los Angeles. She wears pants, she speaks her mind, she sees herself as an equal, but the speed with which she adapts
It is terrifyingly fast. She learns to lower her eyes. She learns to shuffle her feet. She learns to accept the dull ache of the whip as just a fact of life, something to be endured.
She mentions feeling this dulling sensation, like her expectations of basic human rights are being sanded down day by day.
That is the system's design of slavery. It is a slow, methodical process of dulling. It strips away the expectation of agency. Dana realizes how easily human beings can be trained to accept the unacceptable. If you treat a person like a tool for long enough, they begin to function like one simply to survive. It's an adaptive mechanism. If you stay furious every second of every day, you will burn out and die, so you dull yourself to survive.
The most haunting example of this conditioning for me involves the children. Kevin, Dana's white husband who travels back with her at one point, points out a game the enslaved children are playing.
The auction game.
Yeah.
They're not playing tag or hide and seek. They are standing on a tree stump, auctioning each other off to the highest bidder. They're examining each other's teeth. They're imitating the masters and the buyers.
That is just heartbreaking.
It's worse than heartbreaking. It's systemic reproduction in its purest form. These children are rehearsing their own commodification. The system is teaching them to see themselves as property through play before the whip is even used on them. It shows how the system invades the imagination of a child and normalizes its own brutality from the inside out.
So we have these mechanisms, the violence, the enforced dependency, the moral compromise, these different survival strategies, and the conditioning. I want to move now to our explicit systems mapping segment. Let's look at the board and identify the players and the incentives driving them.
Let's do it. So if we map this as a closed system, you have several distinct actors. First, obviously, the enslaved people, Dana, Alice, Sarah, Nigel. Their legal status is property, and they are systematically stripped of agency.
Then the slaveholders.
The slaveholders, Tom Whalen and later Rufus. They are the enforcers of the system, but it's important to note they're also trapped by its economic and social rules. Rufus could theoretically free people, but the social pressure and the economic reality of the plantation prevent it.
And you have other actors, too.
Yes, you have the overseers like Fowler, who are the direct mechanism of violence, and then you have the state itself in the form of the patrollers. These are often non-wealthy whites who are incentivized by the system to police black bodies and maintain the racial hierarchy.
Okay, so what are the incentives driving all of these actors?
For the slaveholders like Tom Whalen, it's primarily economic extraction. He treats people like crops, breeding them for strength, selling them when the market is right. It's purely transactional. For Rufus, the incentive becomes more about psychological control. He wants to possess people, not just their labor, but their emotions. He uses violence to try and force affection, which is this impossible, tragic paradox.
And for the enslaved?
The incentive is survival, pure and simple. Preventing family separation, avoiding a beating or death, keeping a child safe. Every action is weighed against that calculus.
And what are the narratives? What are the stories the system tells itself to justify all this?
The primary narrative is what you could call benevolent ownership. Rufus convinces himself he's a better master than his father because he doesn't seem to enjoy the whipping as much. He thinks he's a good man.
But he still sells people.
He sells people just the same when he needs money or when he wants revenge. The narrative of his own goodness allows him to continue performing evil acts. There's also the narrative of inevitability, the belief that this is just the way the world is, that black people are slaves rather than being enslaved people. It tries to make a social construct look like a law of nature.
Okay, let's map the feedback loops. How does a system this brutal stabilize itself?
It's a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. Let's trace it out. Resistance occurs. Say someone tries to run away. This triggers excessive punishment, a public whipping or selling a family member away.
The spectacle we talked about.
Exactly, the public spectacle. This instills widespread fear in the community, which leads to temporary submission, and that submission creates system stability. But there's another more insidious loop within the enslaved community itself.
The self-policing.
The self-policing, yes. The fear of losing family, like Sarah's fear for Carrie, makes the enslaved police each other. Sarah warns Dana to shut up and keep her head down, not because she's a collaborator, but because she fears the crackdown that Dana's modern rebellion will bring upon everyone. The victims are incentivized by the system to suppress each other's resistance, to maintain a fragile, dangerous status quo.
It's a self-policing mechanism born entirely of trauma. The system is designed so that if you rock the boat, your neighbor is the one who drowns.
And you know they'll drown, so you stop them from rocking it.
I want to pivot now to the present-day implications. The book, as we said, is set in 1976, the bicentennial. And that choice was obviously not an accident.
No, it is a crucial juxtaposition. Dana returns from the brutal, lived reality of slavery to a country that's celebrating 200 years of freedom. The contrast is designed to highlight the concept of erasure.
Erasure of what?
The erasure of the foundation of that freedom. The bicentennial celebrated a clean, mythic history, fireworks, tall ships, noble founding fathers. Kindred exposes the messy, violent, bloody reality that funded that freedom and built the country.
And that erasure becomes literal in the book's epilogue. Dana and Kevin go looking for proof of the people they met. They go to historical societies, they look through records.
And they find almost nothing. A few names in a family Bible. A bill of sale for a man named Sam. That's it.
Yeah.
This is systemic erasure. The system was designed to turn people into commodities, and commodities don't leave biographies behind. They don't leave diaries or monuments. The whole struggle of the book is an attempt to reclaim the humanity of those who the system was designed to erase.
We also need to talk more about Kevin. He's Dana's white husband in 1976. A progressive, modern writer, he gets stranded in the past for 5 years and has to play the role of master to survive and protect Dana.
And this is where Butler delivers a very subtle but absolutely devastating critique. Kevin fits into the role of master a little too easily.
He really does. He starts to get comfortable. He finds ways to justify it.
His accent changes. He stops noticing the daily brutality because he's in the target of it. He starts saying things like, "It's not so bad here if you know the rules." It suggests that the position of power itself is seductive and corrupting, regardless of an individual's modern morals. If the system lays out a red carpet of privilege for you, it's very, very hard not to walk on it.
It shows that structural continuity is a real thing. You can take a 1976 liberal, drop him in 1815, and the system will still privilege him, and he will, consciously or not, absorb that privilege. It's like putting on a uniform. Eventually, you start acting like the rank that uniform represents.
It implies that master isn't just a person. It's a structural position that society invites certain people to occupy. And Butler is suggesting that that invitation, in various forms, still exists today.
Which brings us right to the connections to our channel, to crisis and perception. We talk a lot about how systems outlast individuals.
Yes, and we see that perfectly here. Tom Weiland, the old patriarch, dies in the book. And for a moment, you might think, okay, the evil tyrant is gone, things will get better.
But they don't.
They get worse. Rufus takes over. And despite promising to be better, despite being raised partly under Dana's modern influence, he becomes even more tyrannical and unpredictable than his father.
Why?
Because the role shapes the actor. The economic incentives of the plantation didn't change. The social pressures didn't change. Rufus steps into his father's boots, and they fit perfectly. The system is stronger than the individual conscience. He cannot be a good master, because the noun master fundamentally precludes the adjective good.
Another connection is how perception is shaped by incentives. Rufus genuinely seems to believe he loves Alice.
He does. In his mind, it's love. But because he holds absolute power, his perception is completely warped. The system allows him to redefine rape as claiming his rights. He redefines holding a woman hostage as protecting her. When you have no one to check your power, your perception of reality distorts to justify your actions. He can't see himself as a monster, so he hallucinates a reality where he's a benevolent, tragic lover.
And finally, the most visceral connection for us, the idea that power embeds itself in bodies.
This is a core theme of our channel. Systems don't just exist in laws or abstract economic charts. They write themselves on human flesh. Dana's back is permanently scarred by the whip. She loses her teeth, she's beaten and bruised, and finally she loses her arm.
And she brings that physical damage back into the present, into 1976.
She does. And that missing arm is the ultimate symbol. She brings the physical cost of 1800 slavery into her 20th century living room. It's Butler's way of arguing that we're all walking around with these phantom limbs, parts of ourselves, our society, that were taken by historical systems, scars that we carry even if we don't remember exactly how we got them. History isn't a book on a shelf. It's the ache in your bones. That leads us to our conclusion then. We need to reflect on what this deep dive, what this book changes about our view of history.
I think first and foremost, it forces us to reframe resistance. We stop asking that arrogant modern question, why didn't they just rebel? And you start to see the immense, calculated, systemic pressure that was designed to prevent rebellion at every turn. You see Sarah saving her daughter, you see Alice just trying to survive one more day, and you realize that survival is a form of rebellion in a system that is designed to crush you.
And it absolutely reframes trauma completely. Trauma isn't just an event that happens and then is over. It's an inheritance. Dana carries the scars of her ancestors because she literally was there. But metaphorically, the book suggests we are all there. The past flows directly into the present. You can't just erect a firewall between 1815 and today. The water from that river is still flowing in our own.
The book ends with a very complicated, very messy resolution. Dana is forced to kill Rufus. She has to kill him to save herself from rape and from being permanently trapped in the past. But even after all that, in the epilogue, she tries to find some good in him. She mourns him.
And that leaves us with the final provocative thought. Dana loved her oppressor in a very complex, tangled way. They were kindred after all. And it leaves us with this open question. How much of the master, the logic, the incentives, the narratives lives on in the institutions we still inhabit today. And maybe more uncomfortably, if you were dropped into that system, how quickly would you be dulled into acceptance?
Would you be, Dana, fighting to keep your soul intact?
Or would you be Kevin, slowly, perhaps unknowingly, getting used to the comfort of the big house?
That is a terrifying question to end on, but a necessary one.
It's the only honest question the book leaves you with.
Kindred is written by Octavia E. Butler. If you haven't read the full text, we highly, highly recommend it. The narrative does something to you that a summary simply cannot capture.
It is an absolutely essential text.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis and Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.
Until next time.
Stay curious.